Hello, we're back today with another stream. Let me just check whether the sound works. This time I'm streaming on both YouTube and Twitch. Let's see. Okay. I need to change the title. Okay. The audio should be better, but I think it's still a little bit laggy for some reason. But the audio should be better this time. Okay. I'm also gonna be eating some pizza. Um, okay. I hope so. My internet isn't very good, so it's gonna. I think my Twitch live stream may cut off and come back again. My YouTube live stream, it may slow down, but I think it will stay continuous, hopefully. Okay. So I'm gonna close this tab now, so it doesn't take internet from it doesn't reduce my bandwidth, right? Okay. So let's look at Kurt Model. I want to react to um, Chris Langdon's interview, but I think let's react to this consciousness iceberg first in this video. I don't know how long this live stream is gonna be. Maybe 1 hour, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 1 hour and a half. I'll see. But I may go live again in maybe like 5 hours. For 5 hours, I may go live again. Okay, let's continue.
Welcome to the Consciousness Iceberg, a project where we'll explain consciousness from several distinct angles, including the latest theories from the academies, such as integrated information theory, or Yosha Bach's theories, or panpsychism, but as well as other traditions like what the Vedic texts say, or the different schools of Buddhism, and we'll even explore altered states of consciousness. All of this will be done in a rigorous fashion similar to the string theory iceberg, which you can check out, and the link is in the description.
Let me change the title. Um, so it's gonna be like a watch party. It's gonna be cool. Okay. I cannot edit the title. Okay.
Robert Lawrence Kuhn, by the way, is the host of the series Closer to Truth and has a series specifically on consciousness in there. And that link is also in the description. Check them both out. I can't recommend them highly enough. Now let's begin with the first layer, an introduction to consciousness. Layer 1, an introduction to consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness is the state of being aware and responsive to one's surroundings. It encompasses a range of mental phenomena, including thoughts, including feelings, sensations, perceptions, etc. Note that many conversations about consciousness get stuck as soon as someone asks, "Hey, what's the definition you're using?" Now, the reason is that even with what I just said, or what anyone will say, consciousness is defined with words circularly. This is the case with anything that doesn't straightforwardly map to something physical. Now, there are physical theories of consciousness, and we're going to explore pretty much every single one.
Let me get Coke 1 second. Okay.
One of them in the subsequent layers, and we're also going to explore pretty much every single one of the non-physical theories as well. But the issue is that you could always say, okay, well, what do you mean by mental phenomenon? What do you mean by thoughts? What's the definition of feelings? What about sensations? What's the definition of a perception or a qualia? If you were to try to provide a definition, they'll be explicated with further words, and the clever person can just remark, hey, what do you mean by those words? So, in order to make progress, we're just going to have to move beyond this and provide analogies. Most people think of consciousness broadly as either a spotlight or a stream. Now, the spotlight people will say that it illuminates, consciousness illuminates a small part of some vast landscape of mental activity, whereas the stream people will say consciousness is like a flowing stream of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. What's an uncontroversial statement is that consciousness is what allows you to experience the world, and most would say, by the way, that consciousness is not identical to those experiences. Rather, it's what allows those experiences to be experienced. It's also tied to choice and thus to free will. Now, the question naturally occurs, why the heck does consciousness matter? And the answer then immediately.
Okay. Let me comment here. For the definition of consciousness, I think the one of the simplest way to define it. Well, I mean, the way I'm gonna define it right now is kind of an idealist way, but I think we can equate consciousness with information. If there's information anywhere, or if it's like if there's information, information is really meaningless if there's not something apprehending the information. Otherwise, what is it? I mean, is it anything at all? Information is only meaningful if it holds some kind of form and shape and some kind of reality. And that apprehension that information holds within itself, that is what I think is consciousness. That's how I would define consciousness personally. I'm not gonna go into too much detail because this video is long and I'm gonna be reacting to this over multiple streams. Um, and I think I don't need to delve too very deep at every point. I can watch the video and pause every time, and I think that will be enough uh, to elaborate enough on my opinions on consciousness and how it can be defined. But in general, I think I think that is what consciousness basically is. It's just information. And information does not have any meaning if it doesn't have the apprehension that makes it information. So consciousness, in my opinion, is information. That's how we can define it. Or at least we can define it in the way that it is not information in the dark. Uh, but yeah, it is not information in the dark, meaning it is not information that has no apprehension. Otherwise, the information wouldn't really exist because information really makes sense only if there is something that limits it, right? For example, the information of 5 apples doesn't it has the apprehension of being apples and being numbered 5, the quantity being 5, and these 5 apples, these limitations that define the information, that is what I think apprehension is. But if this apprehension wasn't there, then the information wouldn't really exist. And in my opinion, that apprehension is the consciousness itself. And I don't think that the apprehension is consciousness. In my opinion, the information itself has the apprehension, and that is consciousness. Okay, let's continue.
Really jumps out. Well, it's the
And when I mean
foundation.
by not
Heck
in
does
the dark, like the consciousness isn't in the dark, I mean like if it was in the dark, then it wouldn't have that apprehension. That's what I mean. In the dark, meaning not without apprehension, without something that defines it. Yeah.
consciousness matter? And the answer then immediately jumps out. Well, it's the foundation of your being. It's what makes you who you are. But there are some challenges. The challenges are that defining consciousness is notoriously difficult, as we've mentioned. Number 2, explaining consciousness. We don't have an understanding of how consciousness comes about from, say, the physical processes of the brain, or if it indeed comes about in that fashion. And number 3, measuring consciousness. It's proven quite challenging to measure consciousness objectively. The mind-body problem. The mind-body problem is an issue I'm sure you've heard referenced plenty. It's about various questions regarding how the mind, which seems immaterial, relates to the body, which appears material, or at least physical, as some say. Some people, like Chomsky, have called consciousness a ghost in the machine, more inhabits the machine of the body. I've actually spoken to Chomsky more than any other
I'm gonna get milk. It's kind of weird to drink milk with pizza, but I'm gonna go get milk because I don't have no more Coke. So just give me a second. I'm back.
both mind and body, or some people call
Okay. Let's comment here. Actually,
it spirit and matter, or some other people call it consciousness and the concrete. With spirits and ghosts in films, what they're conveying is this concept that something disembodied is interacting with the physical world around it. This quote-unquote interaction problem is exactly this. How, and I mean exactly how, does the mind and the body causally interact, given their ostensible...
okay. So in my opinion, there is, uh, in my opinion, to solve this issue, well, number one, I have to say I'm an idealist, but I think the way to approach this is to understand that, um, well, we have to understand that everything that we experience depends on observation. So we are observing stuff to be able to experience it, including how eventually, when we discover how our brain connects to our mind, when we eventually discover how that happens, that will be dependent on our observations, right? In my opinion, it will be something that uh, lets us traverse. It will be something that we can go if we like follow it. Like if we follow a line, if we make a line with our finger on our hand like this, let's say this is consciousness, this is the body. We can just gradually go through either way. You know, we can see, for example, if we prove, for example, that consciousness is vibrations, for the sake of the argument, and if there are vibrations in the brain, that we have proved that that is what consciousness is in the brain. It's just the vibrations that occur. If we prove that consciousness is quantum, for example, it's quantum, then all we need to do is we should find where those quantum measurements occur. If consciousness, like in panpsychism, if it is inside everything in the universe, if it is a part of everything, then we have to, for example, one way to think about that is to look into quantum particles. Now, quantum particles have spin. They, by themselves, I mean, without relation to any other object, they can give you a spin, a value inherent to the particle. Now, if it is able to do that because of consciousness, because let's say, for example, the information about the spin uh, can only exist through some form of apprehension, and let's say that apprehension is consciousness. Let's say we somehow know that, then we can say that the particle is conscious, and its consciousness, all its consciousness is the information it encodes about its spin. Now, with that in mind, all we need to prove that our experience comes from the fundamental spin of particles. Um, you have to find some kind of connection. For example, maybe there's something in the brain that causes instant measurement of the spin of particles. For example, when we look at light, when we look at something, the information, the light, the photons hit our eyes, and then our nerve system from the eyes, our nerves take that information into the brain, and there's something in the brain that collapses that measurement into this visible field. That collapse, we just need to prove that that collapse is somewhere in the brain, and by that collapse, the information we will have measured what we see, and through that measurement, that is consciousness, basically. I think, I mean, there are many ways. I think that we can. I think the mind-body problem, I think, is eventually solvable, but I think it will have to have some concessions, maybe on both sides of the argument, whether idealism or materialism. Regardless, I think I think um, well, I basically just said how I think consciousness works. I think it's a measurement that happens in the brain. But the thing is, the brain is only relevant. The other side of the equation is that what I'm thinking about. The brain is only relevant because we observe it, right? So that's something else to consider. But if we keep looking into the brain, eventually our observation. So if observation collapses the way it functions, so it collapses the probabilities. If we keep looking into the brain, eventually we will collapse the point where consciousness becomes matter or matter becomes consciousness. And in my opinion, we could eventually prove that they are they are the same thing. I mean, not exactly the same thing, but maybe what matter is collapsed wave function. Maybe that is why it's very wave function collapses. It's not any more probability, right? It becomes deterministic. Um, but before the collapse, it's not deterministic. So it could be that what matter is a collapsed wave function because there's something apprehending this wave function. So it collapses into a definite state. And maybe that is what the interaction problem is. Matter is a collapsed wave function, and our consciousness does the measurement. And if we look into the brain enough, we may find where the information from our visual in our visual cortex, how that the signals from the eyes, how they collapse in the brain to form uh, to do, and that apprehension is our visual field. I mean, I think something it's gonna. I think it's gonna eventually be. I mean, I'm not saying that is how consciousness works, but I'm saying that we will have to find a way to traverse from matter to consciousness or from consciousness to matter. Yeah, we'll have to find a way to do that eventually. But I think it's possible. I don't think it's an unsolvable question at all. Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the future, sometime in the future, we're gonna know how it works. Probably. Maybe I may have been talking. I don't know. I hope I make sense. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's my comment for this section of the video. Let's continue.
The mind and the body causally interact, given their ostensibly separate nature? Are they not as separate as we thought? There's also, by the way, the twin union problem, which concerns how so-called joining a mind to a body gives rise to this mind-body union that we call a human being, aka.
Yeah. I think here's the thing. I think the body and the mind are actually indeed the same thing, but because now I'm gonna be talking from an idealist point of view. Uh, they are the same thing. Well, the materialists also think they are the same thing, so that's very interesting. But I think from idealist point of view, they are the same thing because it's just that consciousness and matter are not different things. They are the same thing in the first place. Consciousness is simply apprehending the limitless potential that is encoded in the waves. And the waves, by the way, here's the thing. We only know about the wave function because in the double slit experiment, we're doing a measurement in both instances, whether we're whether we're looking for the wave function or whether we're looking for the interference pattern or whether we're looking for just the two lines that happen after measurement. We're still doing a measurement at the end, and the measurement at the end is a screen at the end where the particle hits. That's a measurement. So without a measurement, even the wave function is really um, even wave behavior is really meaningless without a measurement. So yeah, I think I don't think there's like a body and a mind. I think mind is also the body because in another way, we could describe this as our experience is us because it is everything we will ever be, because it's everything we will ever experience, and we're not going to experience anything else. All of our experience is us, but our us is the experience too. So it's really we're just talking about two sides of the same coin: body, mind, or mind, body. But another point is that we may not be limited to the physical locality that we're used to, and from that point of view, we could say it's still the same thing. But we could also be talking about our consciousness shifting rather than our mind, let's say, shifting rather than our body, um, rather than our consciousness being unrelated to the body, for example, something like that. I hope, I hope I make sense there. Well, I guess if the mind can shift outside the body, then technically the mind is not the body, but I don't know, maybe they are still connected because they must be still connected because it eventually comes back by itself. And if it doesn't come back, then the body dies, I think, right? Yeah, so they may still be connected. So they may still be the same thing technically, but maybe not. Well, I'll have to think about that more, whether the mind is the body or. But even if the mind is not the body, as long as the mind didn't shift away from the body, that a that has not shifted away from the body yet, that is the body. It's the same thing. But it's really interesting now that I think about because if the mind can shift from the body, then it may not really be. Um, then technically, what I said about the mind not being the body, or the mind being the same as the body anyway, it may be different. It may be different than what I said. But in any case, let's continue the video.
Rise to this mind body union that we call a human being, aka you. Sleep, dreams, and altered states. Sleep, dreams, and altered states of consciousness represent deviations from our usual waking state. These experiences involve shifts in brain activity, alterations of perception, and differences in awareness. Sleeps and dreams, for instance, can be likened to journeys into some other realm of consciousness, while altered states can be seen as windows into some hidden depth of the mind. Concretely speaking, sleep is exigent for both physical and mental health, playing a role. Dreams are often bizarre and nonsensical, as you may well know, and many think that they're some expression of our subconscious mind or mechanism for strengthening memories. As for lucid dreaming, we'll speak about that in a later layer of this consciousness iceberg, so subscribe to get notified. Altered states, such as those that are experienced, let's say, during meditation or some religious ceremonies or under the influence of psychedelics, are said to inspire creativity and self-discovery. Now, creativity has been demonstrated in the psychological literature, but self-discovery is a bit trickier as there's not a consensus on the definition of that word, and what you're discovering may not be yourself, but may be something that you perceive as yourself. These altered states may even enhance spiritual understanding. So some altered states, like near-death experiences, by the way, put pressure on materialistic views of consciousness by suggesting that our awareness may extend beyond the mere physical. Freud, by the way, that is to say, you have some hidden goals or some hidden wishes or instincts, and you want to fulfill them in a playground that isn't tied to material reality. Again, if there's a material reality. So perhaps it's better stated as waking reality, especially as these goals and instincts and wishes are given to you by a subconscious. Now, there are some problems here that are left outstanding. So, why do dreams have such strange content? What is the relationship between the conscious and the subconscious mind? And lastly, are altered states merely illusions, or do they provide access to genuine realities?
Okay. So, and here I will say, um, well, it is for sure that our conscious experience goes through multiple types of realities. I mean, or multiple types of experiences. We have conscious waking experience. We have dreams, uh, ordered, but usually they are not ordered and you don't remember them. Um, and then you have visionary experiences in religious rituals, and then you have psychedelic experiences. Whether or not the experiences are real, I think, I mean, as an idealist, I think that is irrelevant because it's still an experience that occurs. Whether or not it is real, I don't know. Like, what does that mean? Is it real? Like, I mean, maybe one way to think about whether it's real is to think about whether the entities that you see in experiences other than waking life are those entities conscious themselves. That is one way to think about whether they are real. Um, but usually those experiences are have like their own terms in a way. So, for example, dreams dreams usually um, let me think about this. So, we are conscious, waking life. What really the difference between our waking consciousness and other levels or other forms of consciousness that we experience is that waking consciousness is very ordered. All right. So uh, usually, for example, if you put your phone somewhere, and let's say you didn't forget about it, but you put your phone somewhere in another room, and you go 6 months into another place, and you come back. If no one touched the phone is you put it in a safe. Simply be aware of. But in dreams you could look, for example, at the clock. You could see 6 p.m. You turn around and look back. It was gonna be 3 p.m. Right? So that is, I think, the main objection that a materialist would have against other types of conscious experience. But here's the thing: it seems like, I mean, I'm gonna. It seems like even waking experience is not actually really that ordered either. It's just way more ordered than dream. It's not really ordered. It doesn't. It's not really ordered in every sense. For example, I mean, the best example for this is the measurement problem, right? Uh, for some reason, when you are measuring the movement, or when you are measuring how the particle is going, the particle only goes or only moves the way you are measuring it. But if you don't measure it, the particle moves any way it wants, and usually not in any way it moves, it's through a probability, but it it moves through a wave function, right? Through a probability. But if you collapse the probability, it moves deterministically. So it seems like even real life is not really that concrete. For example, even if you put your phone in a safe and you go for 6 months and come back, even though usually yes, it's gonna be 100% there. Technically though, if uh, technically, I mean, if somehow you stop measuring that it is there, the phone is there, and the phone technically can move in a wave function fashion, and it can be not there anymore. Uh, Even though the possibility for that is very small, because this measurement problem usually is only well detectable at the Planck scale, really. I mean, uh, you have to send electron by electron for the to do the double slit experiment, for example. But even um, but I mean, if we are to say that all matter is made of particles, then the chance that a matter can uh, work through the wave function or behave as the wave function and not in a deterministic manner, that is technically possible. Okay, I was going to say something else. Yeah. Also, something else that is very important to think about, but it is more of a hypothesis. It is the non-dual state. Almost, I mean, either all religions or most Eastern religions and Western religions in some codified way, or mostly Eastern religions only. But almost, I mean, I want to say almost everyone, but almost all people or almost all cultures on Earth. But I think that maybe that's a stretch. So I'm just gonna say that many cultures in the past um, believed in the existence of a non-dual state, of a non-dual experience, right? I think if a true non-dual conscious experience exists, then that would represent an issue for, I mean, but if you experience it yourself, or if someone experiences it, or if you can prove that something like that exists at all, then technically that experience may be real. The reason for that is the experience is like I don't know how to explain, but if it is stable, it's not gonna have anything affecting it because it's a non-dual thing. There's nothing that's gonna go into it or gonna outside of it. There's nothing that's gonna change in it. There's no there's no momentum basically in there. There's no momentum at all. So if there's no momentum at all, then technically that state could be real. Why it could be real? Um, because there's nothing that's ever gonna affect a state of non-dual a non-dual state with no momentum at all. There should be some kind of momentum to get out of it or to get like to change it or to have any change in it. If this state is stable and if it is non-dual, if it's truly non-dual, we may be if it may be even I think actually it is mathematically provable that it wouldn't have a true non-dual state would be real because it wouldn't have any nothing would affect it basically. I think it's always gonna be there somewhere. It's gonna be somewhere, but it's gonna be there. And if one can achieve it, then it kind of like proves itself basically, right? Because there's nothing to, I don't know how to explain it, but basically you could say it's the most ordered form of existence, basically, right? So henceforth the most real in a way. I hope that makes sense. And let's continue.
Illusions, or do they provide access to genuine realities? Free will versus determinism. The debate over free will versus determinism tends to center on whether our choices are actually free, chosen by us, or predetermined by some prior event/events. For those who are unfamiliar, determinism is like being on a train where you have a set track and you can't deviate from it. Furthermore, you can only move forward. Whereas free will is akin to, let's say, a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you have the power to select between different potentials, making one of those potentials into some actuality. The reason this debate has
Actually, let me check the Twitch stream on my phone for a second. Okay. I think it's a little laggy, but I hope it's fine. Let's continue.
can't deviate from it. Furthermore, you can only move forward. Whereas free will is akin to, let's say, a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you have the power to select between different potentials, making one of those potentials into some actuality. The reason this debate has been popular for thousands of years is that it has implications for our responsibility, our morality, our consciousness, and even God. An example would be if our choices are predetermined, well, even free will is akin to, let's say, a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you have the power to select between different potentials, making one of those potentials into some actuality. The reason this debate has been popular for thousands of years is that it has implications for our between, and you can't deviate from it. Furthermore, you can only move forward /events. For those who are unfamiliar, determinism is like being on a train where you have a set track and you can't deviate from it. Furthermore, you can only move forward. Whereas free will is akin to, let's say, a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you have the power to select between different potentials, making one of those potentials into some actuality. The reason this debate has been popular for thousands of years is that it has implications for our responsibility, our morality, our consciousness, and even God. An example would be if our choices are predetermined, well, can we ever be held morally responsible? If so, how? If not, why? Also, does consciousness grant us the power to make free choices? Is that the role of consciousness? What is the role of consciousness? Again, this whole free will versus determinism, as well as sleeps, dreams, lucid dreaming, altered states, mind body, consciousness, etc., all of these will be talked to in greater length in subsequent layers. This is just the introductory layer to this iceberg. Greater length in subsequent layers. This is just the introductory layer to this.
Okay, I'll be commenting all this. Let me just get milk because it's almost done. Actually, we talk about before I go. So, free will and determinism. That is a very good, it's a very intricate topic. But I'm gonna talk about it. um, okay. So here's the thing. You know how Einstein said God doesn't throw dice? Well, I think he does. I think God does throw dice, but he knows the outcome of the dice. But the dice he throws them anyway. The dice that are thrown is our consciousness, and the outcome of is the dice's outcome depends on our attitude and what we the probability basically the probabilities in the wave function. The highest likely probability is what we choose to occur. Now, that's not always what occurs. Sometimes we can choose things, sometimes we can not will things hard enough, basically, for that, for the exact probability to fall on what we want to happen. But when God throws the dice, the we try we ask God basically to throw the dice in a way that our actions that reflect our will in our actions. And God knows the outcome of the dice anyway. But but that is as far as God is concerned, whether He knows the outcome of the dice. As far as reality is concerned, the outcome of the dice is nowhere. The information about the outcome of the dice is nowhere in reality. So it is truly random. So our free will is basically the probability that the outcome of the dice is gonna be. God already knows the outcome, but Him throwing the dice in reality, but He throws the dice in reality, uh, because in reality, the outcome of the dice is not encoded. The outcome it's random. God knows what the outcome is gonna be, but the outcome within as far as reality is concerned, we will it to be a certain way. I think that's how free will works. It's basically uh, we're trying to we're trying to push reality into a certain probability, and it is not determined. And I think when Einstein said God doesn't throw dice, I think actually God I think the wisdom is actually if God does throw dice. That's I think the true way it should be. Not that God made it deterministic. Because if God made it deterministic, then it's true. Then it's all determined, and there is no free will. But if it is a probability, then the encoding or then what determines the outcome of the probability is nowhere in the universe because it's random. But as far as God is concerned, He knows everything, so He knows the outcome of the dice. But the throwing of the dice, or the dice rolling over and hitting and falling on a certain number, that is what free will is. That's randomness, right? I'm gonna go get more milk and come back in a second. is I'm choosing to go get more milk, and reality and the probabilities within the wave function and within the measured stuff and whatever is happening, the probabilities within everything is going to converge so that I go get milk. I'm gonna prove that by getting the milk for sure.
Neuroscientific evidence suggests that our decisions are influenced by brain activity. Are they solely determined by them? Many
Well, yeah, here's the thing. This is very interesting here. Um, our decisions are influenced by neural activity, but neural activity are quantum effects, fundamentally, in my opinion. I mean, it's not in my opinion. I think, well, if everything can be reduced to quantum effects, then I guess yes.
instance, explaining consciousness is one. If our choices aren't caused by prior events, then what causes them? Neuroscientific evidence suggests that our decisions are influenced by brain activity.
Yeah, and by the way, there's this way. I mean, I don't know if we can think of it like this, but it's just, I mean, it may have occurred to my mind before, but it occurred to my mind right now. So let's sketch something here uh, to uh, to explain it better. Okay. Um, so this is the diagram from last stream about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. All right. Can I do another diagram? Great. So let's just draw quantum probability, interference pattern. Let's draw an interference pattern here, like this, right? Okay. So this is our interference pattern, very beautifully drawn. These are our choices. So we have choice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so these are choices. Why does God throw dice? Now in this instance we have the dice has 9 sides, and so there are 9 things that can happen. The likeliest thing is number 5, choice number 5. The least likeliest choices are 1 and 9. Now this is, let's say this is us, this is someone, right? Human being, a human, okay? And the human, the ability to choose is not that the human chooses because of stuff that happened before, but he chooses out of probabilities of stuff that may have happened before and probabilities of stuff that are gonna happen. So his choice eventually will fall on one of these, right? It's eventually gonna be one of those. But his ability to choose stems from the random nature of the outcome of his choice. Now, I'm not explaining this exactly well right now, but I need to think about this more to explain it well. But I hope you get the general idea. I'll think about that about how probabilities are necessary for free will more. We can talk about it next video, next stream.
Our choices aren't caused by prior events, then what causes them? Neuroscientific evidence suggests that our decisions are influenced by brain activity. Are they solely determined by them? Many physicists argue that the feeling of free will is are they solely determined by them? Many physicists, whereas many will. There are other definitions, such as one that is compatible with determinism called compatibilism. The self and identity. The self is the sense of being a distinct individual.
Well, here's the thing. Whether or not it is determinism is really irrelevant if there's nothing in the universe encoding a deterministic uh, unfolding of causes and consequences. If it is purely random in the universe and only God knows about its outcome, then it's really irrelevant whether God determined it or not. He made it random, fundamentally. So, yes, our free will does exist, um, and God knows about its outcome. But as far as how it works within the universe, it works through a probabilistic cause and consequence. There is like probabilities, and because there's actual probabilities and it's kind of random, then it doesn't matter. It's just God throws dice. You're the dice, and the outcome of and you can, as the dice, you can kind of lean over here or lean over here to choose the outcome. And he already knows what outcome you're gonna choose, but the universe is that dice being thrown around, basically. You can think, yeah, like something like that.
The self and identity. The self is the sense of being a distinct individual with your own unique history, your personality, and your set of experiences. Identity is the continuity of the self across time. This is one of the ways that in Buddhism, it's misrepresented by saying that the self is an illusion. Yes, Buddhist texts do emphasize that, but what they mean by illusion isn't that the self is false or identity is false, but rather that identity and the self change and are not persistent across time. You can still have this continuity, though, much like Heraclitus with the river. The self is central to consciousness. It allows us to have a first-person perspective and experience ourselves, self-consciousness, as agents. Our sense of self is the basis of something called personhood, which enables moral responsibility, and it also gives our lives meaning and purpose. Introspection, as well as self-awareness, are aspects that are discussed frequently when people reference the concept of the self.
Okay, so here I'm gonna say, yeah, I agree. So the Buddhist notion of no self um, is that there are no is that there is no unchanging fundamental nature that defines anything other than the fundamental nature of reality. There is nothing consistent about our personality, and what that means is not that doesn't mean that there is no self in the way there's no there's nothing experiencing consciousness. I, I mean, in general, what no self means is that there is nothing determining what you are. There is no there's no shape or there's no uh, underlying cause encoded in you or encoded in any person that defines how that person behaves. For example, uh, if someone does something bad, that doesn't define them. That's basically what that means. You know, uh, there is nothing within the person that caused them to do the bad thing. Rather, it is an affliction of mental state that caused them to do that thing. And that affliction is not permanent. It's something that moves and changes and grows and diminishes and dies and raises from the dead. That that is, I think, what no self means. There is nothing concrete that define who you are. And what you define who you are does not need to be anything. It's actually the most fundamental, what you want to be, what you want to thrive towards is the fundamental nature of reality, which is no self. And the reason it is no self, because it is nothing. The fundamental nature of reality is fundamentally nothing. Now, here I'm gonna comment on another thing. In my opinion, the fundamental nature of reality is not nothing, meaning nothing at all. Not like the word, for example, apple. There is no letter W. In the same way, that there is no letter W in the word apple, I don't think that is what nothing means. I don't think it's absolute nothingness. I think it's no thingness, basically, fundamentally. I think it is a one non-duality, empty of other, rather than empty of self, basically. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's continue.
Introspection means looking inward, own feelings, your own, while is about being conscious of yourself as a distinct individual. However, some argue that the
Yeah,
self
yeah. Here's the thing. In my opinion, we are not distinct individuals. We are all perturbations in the field of consciousness. So we are not really distinct. Rather, it, basically, you can shift your consciousness into other things, into other entities, even in this material world, other objects. You can shift your consciousness into them, into those, and in that moment, you're not really that. But here's the thing: you're gonna come back to your body eventually, and of course, that's something else. But because you're still connected to the body, and uh, you're not connected to the body because there is a self. You're connected to it because of the aggregation, because there is an aggregate connection, that something that continuously, not always continuously, but continuously has attached you to this body, and one can get rid of it. Um, but of course, uh, but it's not permanent, is what I'm trying to say. It's not something that defines consciousness in any way. Okay.
yourself as a distinct individual. However, some argue that the self is an illusion, just a construct of the brain. Some of these people will explore later, like Daniel Dennett, Yosha Bach, Michael Graziano, as well as the religious canon of Buddhism and the Vedas. Something else that naturally creeps up is the question of personal identity over time. What makes you
Then one can break out of it.
if at every instant your body
So
and your
it's
mind
not really you. Yeah, I don't think it is you either. I don't think your body is you in that sense.
makes you the same person, even
It happens for that you feel it is like that right now, but y- you cannot feel like that if you'd like, basically.
if at
Something
every
like that.
instant your body and your mind changes. What is it? What is that core nugget that keeps you you? And also, what is the nature of self-knowledge?
Yeah, basically, I think the notion of no self is that there's no core nugget that makes you you you.
If there is this Kantian distinction where we can't ever truly know the world, the noumena as he calls it, but rather we can only ever know phenomena, well then, can you ever truly know yourself? How do we truly know who?
Yeah. Um. No, you cannot really know yourself because you don't there's no self in the first place. What you can know, however, is the fundamental nature of reality, which everything stems from. And that sort of monad, or I don't know if you can call it monad, I'll look into it, but that state of non-duality, that's, um, that you could say, I mean, I don't want to call it a self because it is not a self, and it is not a self because it doesn't have information about anything. It is nothing. So it is not a self, but it is the fundamental nature of all the field of consciousness, basically. It is it's the fundamental thing. Yeah. We can call it Atman. I think we can call it Atman as long as Atman doesn't mean self, I think. And is that self, as long as we define self as something that differentiates you from other things, Atman is. What Atman is beyond that. Yeah.
You ever truly know yourself? How do we truly know who we are? Layer 2. In layer 2, which is this layer, we'll explore the hard problem 2. In layer 2, which is this layer, we'll explore the hard problem of consciousness, qualia, non-dualism in Indian philosophy, and even John Vervaeke's and Carl Jung's ideas, all explained extremely simply. Now, let's begin with the second layer of consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness was introduced by David Chalmers in 1995. Since then, it's become a central thorn in the side of the philosophy of mind. It asks a simple but beguiling question. Why does subjective experience exist?
Okay. Let me put the leftover pizza in the fridge and come back. I'll actually keep listening.
More specifically, why does it feel like something to be conscious when what we have is supposed to be dead matter at the fundament? This problem is distinct from the so-called easy problems of consciousness. These ostensibly easy ones involve explaining cognitive functions like attention and behavior control. They are considered easy because they can, in principle, be solved by standard methods in cognitive science. The hard problem, however, is purportedly entirely different. At its core, the hard problem highlights something called the explanatory gap. That is to say, the difficulty in explaining how or why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences. While the mind-body problem that we spoke about in the previous layer of this iceberg is broader, link in the description to that, by the way, the hard problem focuses specifically on the subjective, experiential aspects of consciousness. So let's consider a philosophical zombie.
Yeah, so I think, like in the mind body problem, I think, like the hard problem of consciousness, there is a way to bridge the gap between subjectivity and experience. Actually, I think if we're bridging the gap between subjectivity and experience, between subjectivity and material phenomena, rather than the existence of consciousness in the first place, or what consciousness really means in the body, um, I think it's actually easier because uh, we don't have to explain how consciousness works in the brain. What we have to explain is that what we have to look into is how it works. So, like in gravity, we know how gravity works, but we don't know why it works, right? Or actually, we know we have the equations it behaves, but we don't know why it behaves the way it does. We don't. I mean, actually, we don't really know it all the way how it behaves. We only know how it behaves in big in on large scales like interstellar and interplanetary scales. But um, but we're not sure why space and time are bended by gravity. But in any case, what I mean is we may not know how consciousness actually emerges, but we could figure out the connection between our conscious experience and our brain. And in my opinion, the connection is vibrations. Vibrations, I mean, not only vibrations, maybe, uh, or I think the connections can be reducible to vibrations. But I think if we study brain states and if we study how hormonal activity changes vibrations in the brain, and if we can find, I mean, I'm not an expert, so I'm not very sure about the connections that we already have discovered or not have discovered. But if we can find a connection between the vibrational state in the brain and our subjective experience, and if we find them like to be very, and if we find them in a way that they are very connected, very intimately connected, then we will have figured out basically how consciousness or how subjective experience and our brain interact, but we may have not figured out how this becomes that or how that becomes this. Of course, I think the hard problem of consciousness, I'm not sure like what he means the difference exactly between the hard problem of consciousness and the mind body problem, but I think what I'm giving the solution to right now might maybe the mind body problem or the hard problem of course. I'm not really sure to to which uh, to which question I'm giving the solution to, but and I think vibration is the key because I mean I'm gonna get a little bit esoteric. I think vibrations are the key because uh, because there is some inherent vibrational state in the environment that we're measuring the vibrational state of the brain in, there may be some interference and we may be looking at a limited part of the vibrational state of the mind, of the brain or the body. Something like that. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, yeah, uh, yeah, yeah, I think something like that. I do think it's eventually vibrations or frequency, in other words. Yeah, okay, let's continue.
A being that behaves exactly like a human but lacks inner experience. The hard problem asks why we aren't such zombies. Why and how does neural activity supposedly create the taste of chocolate or the experience
Yeah,
of
I think the hard problem refers to, as far as I understand, as him as he is explaining it right now. I think the
holding up your hand? Now, number two is
yeah,
panpsychism.
it is. I don't think. I mean, it must have some kind of proof. If they have proof, that's good. But usually, their proof is the lack of proof, or their proof lacks proof in itself.
Unsuited
But yeah,
to solve this problem. In some ways, it's like throwing or later, and roughly speaking, it suggests that the foundational lithified rock of reality is conscious experience.
and idealism and panpsychism can go together. And I basically think that consciousness is fundamental.
And number four, illusionism, which argues that the hard problem itself is an illusion. We'll explore each.
Yeah. So just a brief comment on illusionism. I think the main problem with illusionism is if there is an illusion, who is having the illusion, or what is having the illusion? Where is the illusion? The place where the illusion is, that still is the hard problem of consciousness because the illusion is somewhere in some uh, the illusion is still somewhere. Someone or something or some kind of uh, some kind of thing is having that illusion. If there was nothing having that illusion and the illusion arose itself, the question remains: Why is there? Why is there illusion? In which perimeter, basically, is the illusion happening? why is the illusion some internal state? Yeah, I think the main issue with illusionism is simply that illusionism kind of posits, it kind of it kind of supposes that this illusion is apprehended by something, but it doesn't explain what it is apprehended by. It only explains that it's something, and it doesn't really care what apprehends it. It's really difficult to argue, in my opinion, that uh, consciousness is an illusion from something material that has no consciousness at all. I mean, if something material has no consciousness, consciousness is arising in nothing, basically. Consciousness is arising in like you get the. I mean, who is? I mean, the simplest way to explain the issue with illusionism is who is having the illusion, right? And even if we say like the illusion arises from immaterial stuff by itself, uh, then isn't that? I mean, so like consciousness exists and it can arise out of material stuff that have no consciousness. I mean, so isn't that consciousness? I mean, illusionism says illusionism does says that consciousness happens out of stuff that doesn't have consciousness. I need to think about this more to really find what I'm trying to explain. But yeah, it's certainly. Um, I'm kind of mind blanking right now. Illusions arise from material objects without anything having the illusion. Without. I mean, if illusion arises from material stuff, even if you don't care, if we don't care whether the material stuff is conscious or not, isn't that consciousness what is arising? And if it is arising deterministically, because that's the other thing, like it has to be deterministic usually in illusionist theories. If it is arising deterministically, that number one has clashes with the probabilistic nature of quantum effects, and the other thing is um, if it arises deterministically, it certainly doesn't feel deterministic. Consciousness, even if arising deterministically, it certainly does not feel deterministic. I mean, yeah, I mean, we're gonna delve into this deeper later in this video. So later in my reactions to this video, so we're gonna be able to talk about it at length. But quite simply, the issue with illusionism is that it posits that there's some kind of something where the illusion occurs. It doesn't explain what that is, but it just says that the illusion occurs. And if the illusion is something, the illusion happens because there is something referencing other stuff in the brain. And if that self-reference in the brain isn't that what consciousness is my question. And if that self-reference is in any way in any way probabilistic, then free will is still on the table. It's not totally deterministic, or it's not deterministic at all. Anyways, I'll be ending the stream here today. I might continue streaming later. I may start streaming later again. This is gonna be for now. Um, it was a very good stream. We learned a lot. We talked a lot. I'm gonna continue reacting to that video. I'm gonna react to all the video in future streams, and we're gonna be talking in length about consciousness, free will, determinism, all this stuff, quantum effects, how this stuff relate to each other, and we will try to understand everything about the universe.